A lawyer showed up at my door with my dad's will. I hadn't seen the man in over a decade. I opened the envelope and found the name of a brother I never knew I had. My name's Trevor. I'm 34, work in logistics, live in a modest 2-bedroom apartment just outside Milwaukee. I've got a daughter, 6 years old, sweetest kid in the world, and a decent co-parenting setup with my ex. Life's not glamorous, but it's mine, and after everything, that's saying something. But let me rewind. The first 20 years of my life were shaped by a man who vanished. My dad, Frank. One day he was there, gruff voice, permanent scowl, always smelling like motor oil, and the next gone. No warning, no note, not even a voicemail. Just disappeared. I was 19. My mom cried herself sick for a year straight, then got up one day and decided crying wouldn't pay the bills. We stopped talking about him. Pretended he'd died. 15 years passed. I got older, got through college, started a family. And then last week, there was a knock on my door. Not a gentle one. This knock had weight to it, urgent, deliberate. I opened it to find a man in a charcoal suit, holding a manila folder like it was some cursed relic. "Trevor Reynolds?" he asked. "Yeah. Can I help you?" "My name's Martin Blake. I represent your father's estate." That word, estate, made my stomach drop. I hadn't heard your father and anything formal sounding in the same sentence since high school. My brain couldn't compute it. "My father's dead," I said slowly. Martin nodded. "Yes. He passed away last month." I didn't respond. I didn't even feel anything. Just a weird numbness, like hearing about the death of a character from a book you forgot you ever read. He handed me the folder. He left a will. You're named in it. And that was the moment, right there, that flipped my world upside down. Because when I opened that folder later that night, I saw a name I hadn't heard in years. Thomas Reynolds. My brother. The brother I didn't even know I had. When I first saw the name, I thought it was a mistake. Thomas Reynolds? Never heard of him. I stared at the line on the will, my fingers trembling just slightly over the paper. There it was, clear as day. To my sons, Trevor and Thomas Reynolds. Sons. Plural. I reread it maybe 5 times before I picked up the phone and called Martin, the lawyer who'd handed it to me. "You sure this isn't some typo?" I asked. "I don't have a brother." His voice was calm, matter of fact. "I assure you, Mr. Reynolds, there is no mistake. Thomas is your half-brother. Born in 2001. Your father kept his existence private." Private. That was one hell of a euphemism. "You mean secret?" Martin didn't answer. "Where is he now?" "He's 23. Lives in Chicago. He'll be here for the reading next Tuesday. He's aware of you." I hung up the call and sat in silence for what felt like an hour. My hands wouldn't stop twitching. I wasn't angry, not exactly. I wasn't even sad. I was confused. Exhausted. Like my entire childhood had just been exposed as some edited version of the truth. My father had another kid. While we were scraping by, me working nights at a grocery store to help my mom with rent, he was out there, building a second life. And then I thought about my mom. Did she know? The next morning, I dropped off my daughter at school and drove straight to the retirement community where Mom lives. I didn't even call first. I needed answers. She opened the door wearing her usual soft smile, hair done, slippers on, always put together no matter what. "Trevor? Everything okay?" I didn't waste time. Did Dad have another kid? Her face didn't change. Not at first. But I saw it. That flicker. Like a light bulb dimming just slightly before it goes out. She stepped aside without a word and let me in. I sat on the couch, and for a long time, she just stood by the window, staring out at the garden. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. "Careful. I found out about Thomas a few months after your father left." I blinked. "You knew?" "I didn't know about him. Not at first. Just that your father had someone else." She turned to face me. Her eyes looked glassy, but she didn't cry. "He left because she was pregnant. That's what he told me when he called. He said he'd made a mess and he had to do the right thing." She snorted bitterly. Apparently, the right thing didn't include telling his son he had a brother. I didn't know what to say. I felt like I'd just discovered a hidden chapter in a book I thought I knew by heart. "And you just never told me?" I finally said. "What good would it have done?" She said, voice cracking. "You were 19. Angry. Heartbroken. You needed to move on. I didn't want you carrying his shame too." I wanted to be mad. I really did. But I couldn't. Because deep down, I got it. She did what she thought was right. Maybe it wasn't, but I understood. Still, one thing was clear. I had a brother. And in 5 days, I was going to meet him. Tuesday came like a train I couldn't stop. I didn't sleep much the night before, just laid in bed staring at the ceiling, running scenarios in my head. What if he was a jerk? What if he was a carbon copy of our father? What if he looked like me? I got to the law office 10 minutes early. The receptionist led me to this wood-paneled conference room that smelled like old books and secrets. Martin was already there, flipping through paperwork. And then the door opened. He walked in like he owned the place. Tall. Athletic. Sharp jawline. Neatly pressed button down. He looked like he stepped out of a GQ ad. And yeah, he looked a little like me. He paused when he saw me. Studied me. Not with judgment, but with this weird mix of curiosity and caution. Like he was trying to figure out which version of me he'd been told about. Trevor? He asked. Thomas, I said, standing up. We didn't shake hands. Just nodded at each other, like that was enough. He sat across from me, and for a few seconds, it was dead quiet. Then Martin cleared his throat and got down to business. I'll make this quick, he said, flipping to the will. Your father left very specific instructions. He read the usual legal stuff, names, dates, assets. And then he hit the part that made my stomach clench. To my sons, Trevor and Thomas, I leave the entirety of my estate, split evenly 50-50. That includes my business holdings, personal property, and the house in Door County. But there is one condition. Martin paused, like he was giving us a chance to brace ourselves. In order to inherit, both parties must spend 30 consecutive days living together at the house. No lawyers. No staff. Just the two of you. Only after those 30 days will the estate transfer. I actually laughed. Out loud. Are you kidding? Thomas looked stunned, but not angry. Just caught off guard. That's insane. Martin closed the folder. I don't make the rules. I just read them. I turned to Thomas. You cool with this? Living in a house with a complete stranger for a month. He shrugged, a half-smile tugging at his lips. Depends. You snore. That made me laugh again, genuinely this time. Martin slid us each a key. You have until the end of the month to begin. After that, the offer expires. We stood outside the building, keys in hand, two strangers bound by blood and a dead man's twisted final wish. Thomas looked at me, sunlight catching the gold flecks in his eyes, our dad's eyes. So he said, you in? I stared at the key for a long second, then nodded. Yeah, I'm in. We drove up separately, met at the property just before sunset. It was one of those crisp Wisconsin evenings, the kind where the air smells like pine and possibility. The house was tucked behind a line of oaks, old but well kept, like it had been frozen in time waiting for us. Thomas pulled up in a black Jeep, leaned against it like some off-duty model, and whistled low when he saw the house. Damn. Didn't expect it to be this nice. Neither did I. I mean, our dad had bailed and stayed ghost for over a decade. I didn't peg him for the lakeside cabin with a wraparound porch type. But there it was, 2 stories, stone chimney, even a weathered canoe flipped upside down by the dock. We stood at the front door, keys in hand, and looked at each other. This is gonna be weird, Thomas muttered. Understatement of the year, I replied. Inside, the house was spotless. Like someone had been maintaining it regularly. Wood-paneled walls, leather furniture, that kind of cozy rustic vibe. It smelled like cedar and old secrets. We split up to check things out. I took the upstairs, 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. One of the rooms had bunk beds, like it was frozen in the 90s. The other was clearly our dad's. Still made, with a flannel shirt draped over the chair like he'd just stepped out. Thomas called me from downstairs. I found him in the kitchen, holding an envelope. It's addressed to both of us, he said. We opened it together. Inside was a note. Handwritten. Our father's unmistakable scrawl. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And I deserve that silence. But you deserve answers. You both do. The truth isn't simple, but it starts in the shed. I left something there. Read it together. And try, just try, to see each other not as rivals, but as what you are. Brothers. I looked at Thomas. His face was unreadable. The shed? He asked. I nodded slowly. Let's go. We walked out back, past the fire pit, to a little red building half sunk into the woods. The padlock had already been opened. Inside, the air was musty. Dust floated like ghosts in the sunlight slashing through the windows. And in the middle of it all, an old wooden chest. Thomas and I looked at each other, then down at the chest. I bent down and opened it. What was inside? Changed everything. The hinges creaked like something out of a horror movie, but inside, it wasn't what I expected. No money. No gun. No secret stash of gold bars. Just a stack of old notebooks. Dozens of them. And a photo album, dusty leather-bound, held shut with a worn strap. I reached for the album first. The cover was cracked and soft, like it had been handled too many times. Inside, there were pictures, some I recognized. Me as a kid, grinning with a popsicle in the backyard. Me and Mom at a water park. Dad, looking younger, smiling down at toddler me. Then the photos changed. There was a woman I didn't know. Red hair, soft eyes. And a baby newborn, wrapped in blue. Thomas. They looked happy. Cozy. Like some alternate version of my childhood was unfolding in those photos. Him on Dad's shoulders. Fishing trips. Birthday cakes. I couldn't stop flipping pages, like I needed to see how far it went. But by the time I hit Thomas's teenage years, the photos got sparse. Then they just stopped. Thomas was quiet beside me, flipping through one of the notebooks. His brow furrowed, jaw clenched. "This one's from 2009, he said. "Right after he left you." I turned to look at him. "What's it say?" He didn't answer right away. Just handed me the book and pointed to a page near the middle. I read. I told her I had to go back. That I had a son who would never understand why I left. She said she didn't want to compete. I didn't blame her. But I couldn't stay with either of them, not when I kept seeing Trevor's face every time I looked at Thomas. I thought I could be a better man by disappearing. Turns out, I was just a coward. My throat tightened. Thomas looked away. "There's more." He kept writing. Like, confessions. Regrets. We sat there for hours, reading page after page of a man unraveling. About how he split his time, sneaking visits to Chicago while pretending to work long shifts. About how the guilt ate at him every time he celebrated a birthday with one son and not the other. About how, in the end, he chose solitude because he couldn't face either of us. He was a mess, I muttered. Thomas nodded slowly. Yeah, but he was our mess. Silence settled between us. Not angry. Not awkward. Just heavy. And then, Thomas said something that caught me completely off guard. "You think we were the only ones?" I blinked. What? He gestured at the chest. This? The letters, the guilt, the hiding? It all screams one thing to me. He looked me in the eye. There might be more of us. I didn't want to believe it. I really didn't. But once Thomas said it, once he put that idea out into the world, it dug in deep and didn't let go. More of us? I mean, hell, Dad already had 2 separate families. Who's to say there wasn't a third? Or a fourth? The man vanished for years. We didn't know where he was half the time. For all we knew, he could have had a whole string of side lives we'd never heard about. Still, part of me clung to denial. "I think you're jumping to conclusions," I said, even as my fingers clenched tighter around the photo album. Thomas shrugged. "Maybe. But something about this doesn't sit right." We brought a couple of the notebooks inside, started flipping through the entries again, looking for names, addresses, clues. And there it was, buried in the middle of a 2016 entry. "See, cold again today. Says she might be pregnant." I told her it wasn't possible, but she swears it is. Haven't seen her since the Albuquerque job. If it's true. Christ. I stared at the page like it had slapped me. "Albuquerque?" Thomas leaned over. "You know anyone in New Mexico?" I shook my head. Dad never talked about going there. "Well," Thomas said, reaching for his phone, "time to find out if we've got another sibling walking around out there." I raised an eyebrow. "You gonna Google Reynolds' bastard children, or something?" He smirked. "Close. I'm ordering us DNA kits." 3 days later, the test kits arrived. I felt ridiculous spitting into a tube and sealing it up like we were sending fan mail to the universe. But Thomas? He was locked in. Focused. Determined to know the whole truth, no matter how ugly. We mailed them off and spent the next week in this weird limbo, half cleaning out the house, half pretending it was normal to be piecing together the wreckage of a man we barely knew. We found more entries. One where Dad mentioned a woman named Leanne, and a beach trip to Galveston. Another where he talked about missing the baby's first steps, again. But never enough to pin anything down. Just breadcrumbs. Then 10 days later, we got the notification. Your DNA results are ready. We opened the site at the same time. I scrolled down to my matches and froze. One name lit up in bold. Percent shared DNA, 27%, half-sibling. Name, Abigail C. Age, 19. Location, Santa Fe, New Mexico. I looked at Thomas. His face had gone pale. Abigail? I asked. He nodded. Same on mine. I leaned back, the air suddenly too thick to breathe. Jesus Christ. We really weren't the only ones. Thomas stared at the screen for a long time. Then he looked up at me. You think she knows about us? I shook my head slowly. No idea. But I think it's time we find out. We argued about how to do it. Thomas wanted to call her straight up, no fluff. Rip the band-aid off, he said. If she's anything like us, she deserves the truth. Me? I wasn't so sure. 19 is young. Hell, I was barely surviving my first semester of college at 19. And now we were about to shatter this girl's reality with a story that sounded like it came from a damn soap opera? In the end, we compromised. I'd message her through the DNA site. Short, polite, no heavy details. Just a toe in the water. Hi Abigail. I believe we may be half-siblings. My name is Trevor Reynolds. I recently matched with you on this platform. If you're open to it, I'd like to talk. No pressure. Best. Trevor. She replied 4 hours later. Hey Trevor. Yeah. I saw that. I've been staring at your profile all day. I'm kind of freaking out, to be honest. My mom never mentioned anything about this. But I'm willing to talk. Can we FaceTime? She attached her number. I stared at the screen for a good minute before turning it to Thomas. He raised an eyebrow. Well. I called her. She picked up after the first ring. The face that appeared on screen was nervous, but calm. Freckles. Dark eyes. Hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked like both of us. It hit me in the gut. Hey, I said awkwardly. Hey, she replied, a tremble in her voice. So, this is real? I nodded. Yeah. I'm afraid it is. Thomas leaned into frame. Hey, I'm Thomas. I'm, your other half-brother. Abigail blinked, and then gave this tiny stunned laugh. Oh my God. There's two of you. I laughed too, mostly out of nerves. So far. She stared for a second. Can I ask, did you know about me? We didn't, I said quickly. We didn't even know about each other until a few weeks ago. Our dad passed away and left a will that, basically forced us to meet. Her expression shifted, serious now. Wait, Frank Reynolds. Thomas and I froze. How do you know that name? I asked. Her eyes flickered away. My mom used to mention it when she was angry. Said he disappeared before I was born. Said he had another family to go ruin. My stomach dropped. She looked back at us. So, I guess that was you guys. There was a long pause. The weight of everything hitting the three of us at once. Listen, I said gently, I know this is a lot. But, we're trying to piece it all together. Figure out who he really was. And we'd like to meet you. If that's something you'd be open to. She didn't answer right away. Then she whispered, I think I need to. We set a date. She'd come to Door County next weekend. And just like that, we were about to meet the sister we never knew we had. Abigail pulled up in a beat-up Honda Civic, bumper duct-taped and back seat packed with snacks and half-unpacked college gear. She stepped out wearing ripped jeans, a hoodie, and this hesitant expression like she was about to walk into a haunted house instead of a lakeside cabin. I opened the door before she could knock. She froze when she saw me, then Thomas, who was right behind. You guys look related, she said, half smiling. You're not exactly blending in either, I replied, and her smile grew, just a little. We all stood there for a second, the awkwardness thick enough to cut. Then Thomas stepped forward and gave her a quick, one-armed hug. Welcome to the weirdest family reunion ever. She laughed. Nervous but real. Inside, we made coffee and sat around the kitchen table like some makeshift tribunal, each of us with a steaming mug and a mountain of questions we weren't sure how to ask. Abigail spoke first. So, how did this all come out? Like, how did you find me? Thomas explained the will, the conditions, the DNA tests. I filled in the blanks, how our dad disappeared from my life at 19, how he left Thomas too. How the notebooks pointed to someone named C, and how we were starting to think that was her mom. When I mentioned the entry about Albuquerque, she nodded slowly. That would have been my mom. Her name's Caroline. My chest tightened. She ever tell you anything? About him? Abigail hesitated. Bits and pieces. She said he was charming. Charismatic. Showed up in her life like a storm and vanished just as fast. When she found out she was pregnant, she tried to track him down. Couldn't. He left no trace. Thomas leaned in. So she never knew about us? No. Not until I showed her your message. Her voice dropped. She cried. Said she always suspected he had other kids. Said he didn't feel done. Whatever that means. I swallowed hard. You angry? She didn't answer right away. Then, I'm angry he made me feel like a mistake. I'm angry for my mom, who raised me alone. And I'm angry for you guys too, because none of us deserved this. Silence fell again. Heavy. Sad. But something else was settling in too. Connection. 3 strangers pulled from the wreckage of the same man's lies, sitting at a table and trying to make sense of their matching scars. That night, we built a fire out back. Roasted marshmallows like it was some twisted summer camp. We told stories about the versions of our dad we knew. The moments that felt good. The ones that hurt like hell. We laughed more than I expected. And when it got late, and the stars came out, Abigail said something I'll never forget. I don't know what kind of man he really was. But if he gave me you too, maybe it wasn't all bad. I looked across the fire at Thomas, who gave the smallest nod. For the first time since the will was read, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness. But maybe the beginning of something better. Abigail had been with us 3 days. And honestly, it was starting to feel natural. We'd gotten past the weird introductions. Shared stories over breakfast. Took turns cooking dinner. Even played cards one night like some low-budget sitcom family. But the whole time, something gnawed at me. There was one room we hadn't touched. Dad's office. The door was closed when we got there, and something about it felt wrong. Like it had a heartbeat. Like it was watching us. That morning, I stood in the hallway, hand on the knob. Thomas stepped up behind me. You ready for this? No, I muttered. But let's do it anyway. We opened the door. The air inside was stale. Dusty shelves, filing cabinets, a big oak desk in the center. The kind of place where secrets like to sit and wait. Most of the drawers were unlocked. We found old tax forms, faded receipts, random stuff, nothing that explained why he spent his final years in isolation. Until I pulled open the bottom drawer. Locked. Of course. Thomas and I exchanged a look. Abigail walked in, chewing the inside of her cheek. Try this, she said, handing me a key we'd found earlier in the shed. We'd assumed it was for storage. It clicked on the first try. Inside the drawer, a flash drive. And a sealed envelope. The envelope was thick, overstuffed, worn at the corners. My name was scrawled across the front. Under it, Thomas's. And then, in smaller letters, Abigail. We sat on the floor and opened it together. Inside were letters. One for each of us. Mine was dated 6 months before he died. Trevor. You were the first. The one who made me believe I could be a better man. And the one I failed most completely. I walked away because I thought I'd ruin you if I stayed. But I watched from a distance. Every birthday. Every graduation. I was there. Just not close enough to taint you. I know that sounds like cowardice. It was. But I hope someday, somehow, you'll understand. I stopped reading, hands shaking. Thomas read his silently, eyes locked on the page. Abigail sat still for a long time before folding hers back up, lips pressed in a thin line. Then we plugged in the flash drive. There were videos. Dozens. Dad, speaking straight into the camera. Short clips. 5 minutes here, 10 there. Spanning years. We watched the first one. He looked younger, healthier. Voice steady. This is for my kids. However many there end up being. If you're watching this, it means I'm gone. And I have a lot to answer for. He smiled sadly. Start at the beginning. That night, we watched 5 of them. In each, he tried to explain. His choices. His guilt. His fear. Sometimes he cried. Other times he laughed, like he couldn't believe his own mess. He talked about love, how it was always real, even when he failed at it. And about how he hoped we'd find each other. How maybe we could become something better than what he was. By the time the 5th video ended, none of us spoke. We just sat there, staring at the screen, trying to process the last sliver of a man we barely knew. It didn't make it right. But for the first time, it made him human. A week passed after we found the letters and the videos. We didn't talk about them much, not directly. But you could feel the shift in the house. The heaviness. Like our dad's ghost wasn't haunting us anymore, just lingering watching. Thomas spent most mornings out on the dock, staring across the water like it held the rest of the answers. Abigail took over the kitchen, baking things none of us asked for but all of us devoured. And me? I went back through the notebooks. I read every page. Not because I was looking for more secrets, but because I needed to understand who the hell this man really was. The guy who shaped all of us by being absent. The man who thought his silence was some form of love. And when the 30 days were up, we got an email from Martin. The inheritance was officially processed. The house, the accounts, the business interests, everything split 3 ways. No more requirements. No more conditions. We could have sold the place and walked away. Could have cashed out, cut ties, gone back to pretending we were strangers with matching DNA. But none of us did. Instead, we packed a picnic, grabbed folding chairs, and drove 2 hours north, to a tiny plot of land next to an old church cemetery. Frank Reynolds' headstone was simple. Just a name and 2 dates. We sat around it like it was a campfire. Didn't say much at first. Just let the wind talk. Then Thomas pulled out a bottle of whiskey he found in the back of Dad's office. Broke the seal. Poured 3 glasses. To the bastard, he said. Abigail raised hers. To the broken man who left behind broken kids. I stared at my glass for a second. Then raised it too. To us, I said. For surviving him. And still being willing to try. We drank. It wasn't a toast of forgiveness. It was a funeral for the pain we didn't know we'd been carrying all our lives. That night, we drove back in silence. Comfortable. Easy. Abigail left the next morning, but she promised to come back next summer. Thomas and I stuck around a few more days, cleaned up the place, added her name to the deed. We weren't close, not yet. But we were brothers. And we were building something. Together. As for the house, we kept it. Not because we needed the property, but because it was the first place all 3 of us ever existed at the same time. Thanks for being here for this story. If it hit you somewhere deep, or reminded you of something in your own life, I'd love to know. Drop a comment below. Because some stories, they're only just beginning.